I'm emotional right now as I talk about it. I felt absolute rage. With Oklahoma City being a counterattack, I was only fighting by the rules of engagement that were introduced by the aggressor. Waco started this war. Hopefully Oklahoma would end it.
It was a sunny morning in Oklahoma City on April 19th, 1995, when a yellow Ryder rental truck made its way through the streets of downtown Oklahoma City. Just before 9 a.m., the vehicle pulled into a parking area outside the Alfred P. Murrah building, and the driver stepped down from the truck's cab and walked away. Minutes later, without warning, over 1/3 of the government building was blown to pieces, instantly claiming hundreds of lives, including those of children. The driver was 26-year-old Timothy McVeigh. Timothy James McVeigh was born on April 23, 1968, in Lockport, New York. He was the only son and the middle child of his Irish-American parents, William McVeigh and Noreen Hill. The marriage was filled with ups and downs, leading to several separations. Ultimately, the family broke apart for good when Tim was 10 years old. Tim opted to remain with his father, while his two sisters moved to Florida, accompanying their mother. Most who knew McVeigh remember him as being very shy and withdrawn. McVeigh was often targeted by bullies in school for his lanky and gawky appearance, giving him the nickname Noodle. His best friend at the time was his grandfather, who introduced him to firearms. The two would often go shooting together, and Tim used this as an escape from the misery he faced in school. Tim fell in love with firearms and expressed wishes to become a gun shop owner someday. He also became intensely interested in gun rights, as well as the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. One day he sent off for a book advertised in the back of a gun magazine called The Turner Diaries. William Pierce, a former American Nazi Party official, wrote the novel using the alias Andrew MacDonald. The plot revolves around a gun enthusiast's response to the government's increased restrictions on private firearms, leading to a bombing at a federal building. McVeigh often spoke about this book and shared it with others he met. Though Tim received poor grades, he graduated from high school in 1986. After high school, he briefly attended Bryant and Stratton College but quickly dropped out. After deciding to quit college, McVeigh found employment as an armored car guard, and his co-workers noted his strong fixation on firearms. In 1988, McVeigh made the decision to enlist in the United States Army at 20 years old, and was sent to Fort Benning in Georgia for basic and advanced training. McVeigh thrived in the Army life immediately, and was seen by those around him as the ideal soldier. While serving in the military, McVeigh would meet real friends for the first time in his life. These friends were Terry Nichols and Michael Fortier. The group shared common interests with firearms and grew up with similar childhoods. After McVeigh urged them to read the Turner Diaries, they all shared a somewhat contempt for the federal government. In 1991, McVeigh would be called for combat during the Persian Gulf War. McVeigh joined the 1st Infantry Division and soon became a sergeant and a gunner on a Bradley fighting vehicle. Upon receiving a promotion, McVeigh developed a reputation for giving undesirable assignments to black servicemen and using racial slurs. During his time in the war, he distinguished himself as the best shot in his platoon. His fellow soldiers reported he hit an Iraqi tank from more than 500 yards and decapitated an Iraqi soldier from over 2,500 yards away with a 25mm cannon. While initially proud, he said he was later shocked and haunted by the carnage he saw on the road while leaving Kuwait City after U.S. troops routed the Iraqi army. The army showered McVeigh with war medals, including a Bronze Star and the coveted Combat Infantry Badge. After returning from the war, he was also invited to try out for the Army's Special Forces, also known as the Green Berets. However, McVeigh was not prepared for the rigorous evaluation program of the Special Forces and gave up his bid to join the elite group on the 3rd day. Shortly afterward, he chose to resign from the Army and received an honorable discharge in 1991. Following his discharge, McVeigh returned to upstate New York. His spirit was broken, he struggled to find steady work, and experienced severe depression. McVeigh expressed frustration with the Army and was vocal about his fear that government agents would try to seize his weapons. His life became a cycle of traveling state to state buying and selling weapons at various gun fairs, as well as preaching a message of the government evils. He became enraged with the government, often writing letters expressing his anger towards taxes, gun control, and foreign policy. At some point, he reconnected with his army friends, Michael Fortier and Terry Nichols. The group would continue bonding over their love of guns and hatred of the government. However, their outrage would reach a breaking point following two events over the next couple years. In the summer of 1992, the FBI went after Army veteran and self-proclaimed white supremacist Randy Weaver on charges of selling illegal sawed-off shotguns. During an 11-day standoff at Weaver's cabin in Ruby Ridge, Idaho, U.S. Marshals shot and killed Randy's dog, his 14-year-old son, and his wife. The incident was proof to McVeigh and the group that the government wanted to take your guns and became a rallying point for others in the militia movement. Following this event, a more controversial tragedy would occur in 1993, the Waco Siege. The Waco Siege was the siege by U.S. federal government and Texas state law enforcement officials of a compound belonging to the religious cult known as the Branch Davidians. David Koresh was the leader of the Branch Davidians, and he was accused of stockpiling illegal weapons. ATF agents attempted to execute a search and arrest warrant at the compound. However, the initial raid resulted in a deadly shootout. To this day, nobody is sure who fired the first shots, but, in the end, 4 ATF agents and 6 Branch Davidians would be killed. The subsequent standoff between the FBI and the Branch Davidians lasted for 51 days, during which efforts to negotiate a peaceful surrender failed. On April 19, 1993, the situation escalated dramatically when the FBI initiated a final assault using tear gas. A few hours later, a fire broke out within the compound, engulfing the buildings in flames. 76 people, including 25 children, 2 pregnant women, and David Koresh, were killed in the blaze. McVeigh watched live as they burned to death, and this served as his boiling point with the federal government. The destruction of the Waco compound enraged McVeigh and convinced him that it was time to take action. He began experimenting with making pipe bombs and other small explosive devices. His initial plan was to go on a campaign of individual assassinations, targeting Attorney General Janet Reno for her responsibility in the Waco siege, Judge Walter Smith, who presided over the Waco trial, and Lon Horiuchi, the FBI agent who killed Vicki Weaver at Ruby Ridge. After concluding that such assassinations would be too difficult, he decided an easier and more powerful plan would be to destroy a federal building, just like in the Turner Diaries, killing as many people as possible in the process. McVeigh's criterion for attack sites was that the target should house at least 2 of these 3 federal law enforcement agencies: the ATF, the FBI, and the DEA. He regarded the presence of additional law enforcement agencies, such as the Secret Service or the U.S. Marshals Service, as a bonus. McVeigh took inspiration from the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, later admitting to studying it religiously and promising himself that he would commit a better bombing. The Alfred P. Murrah building was eventually chosen as the target because McVeigh expected its glass front to shatter under the impact of the blast. He also believed that its adjacent large open parking lot across the street might absorb and dissipate some of the force and protect the occupants of nearby non-federal buildings. Additionally, McVeigh believed the building's open space presented excellent photo opportunities for propaganda use. The attack's planning was set for April 19, 1995, to align not only with the 2nd anniversary of the Waco siege, but also with the 220th anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord from the American Revolution. McVeigh told Nichols and Fortier his plan. Fortier declined to participate, but also told his wife about the plans. Fortier's wife also refused to participate in the bombing, but did assist with creating a fake ID for McVeigh to use for renting vehicles. Over the next months, McVeigh and Nichols would be involved in a string of robberies to raise money for their attack. The two purchased and stole several tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, which, combined with fuel oil, would provide the explosive power for the bomb. All their gathered materials were stored in rented sheds. In October 1994, McVeigh showed Michael and his wife a diagram he had drawn of the bomb he wanted to build. He planned to construct a bomb containing more than 5,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, mixed with about 1,200 pounds of liquid nitromethane and 350 pounds of Tovex. including the weight of the 1655-gallon drums in which the explosive mixture was to be packed, the ideal bomb would have a combined weight of about 7,000 pounds. On April 14, 1995, McVeigh rented a room at the Dreamland Motel in Junction City, Kansas. The following day, he rented a 1993 Ford F700 truck through Ryder under the alias Robert D. Kling. On April 16, 1995, he and Nichols drove to Oklahoma City, where he parked a getaway car, a yellow 1977 Mercury Marquis, several blocks from the Murrah Federal Building. After removing the car's license plate, he left a note covering the VIN plate that read, "Not abandoned. Please do not tow. Will move by April 23rd. Needs battery and cable." Both men then returned to Kansas. On April 18th, Nichols and McVeigh loaded their bomb supplies into the Ryder truck and drove to Geary Lake. They spent the day mixing the bomb ingredients together, eventually creating a nearly 5,000-pound bomb. Following the completion of the truck bomb, the two men split up. Nichols made his way back to Harrington, and McVeigh drove the truck to Junction City. On April 19, 1995, McVeigh entered Oklahoma City at 8:50 a.m. McVeigh chose to wear a T-shirt with a drawing of Abraham Lincoln and the words shouted by John Wilkes Booth after his assassination of the president, "Sic Semper Tyrannis." At 8:57 a.m., he parked the Ryder truck in a drop-off zone situated under the building's daycare center, then lit a 5-minute fuse. A surveillance camera captured an image of the Ryder truck being driven by McVeigh, just minutes before it blew up. As he headed to his getaway vehicle, he dropped the keys to the truck a few blocks away. At 9:02 a.m., shortly after many parents had dropped their toddlers off at the Murrah Building's second-floor daycare center, the bomb went off, tearing off the front of the building. In an instant, the surrounding area resembled a war zone. A third of the building had been reduced to debris, with many floors flattened like pancakes. Dozens of cars were engulfed in flames, and more than 300 nearby buildings were damaged or destroyed. The force of the blast was equal to over 5,000 pounds of TNT, sending shockwaves up to a distance of 55 miles. The death toll was even more devastating. 168 people were killed, including 19 children. Another 680 people were injured. McVeigh managed to make it to his getaway vehicle and traveled north on Interstate 35 near Perry, Oklahoma. Slightly more than an hour after the bombing, State Trooper Charlie Hanger noticed a car driving without a license plate and pulled it over. As Hanger approached McVeigh, he noticed a bulging object in McVeigh's clothing. McVeigh quickly admitted to having a firearm on him, and Hanger arrested him for the illegally concealed weapon. Later that day, federal agents found the vehicle identification number for the Ryder truck and remnants of the license plate. Within hours, investigators headed to Junction City, Kansas, to see who might have rented it. By April 21st, investigative trails had led authorities to Timothy McVeigh. Initial suspicions of Arab extremist involvement gradually faded away. Clinton Van Zandt, the lead FBI investigator at Waco, urged fellow agents to seek a white male with military experience and a member of some militia group, angry for what happened at Ruby Ridge in Waco. Agents who visited Elliott's body shop in Junction City, where the Ryder truck was rented, gathered information about the renter known as Robert Kling, aka John Doe No. 1, a white male with a brush cut and a prominent nose. The manager of the Dreamland Motel indicated that John Doe No. 1 closely resembled Timothy McVeigh, who had rented a room there before the bombing. A former co-worker in New York also suggested that John Doe No. 1 might be the man he knew as Timothy McVeigh. A computer check came up with information that surprised investigators. Timothy McVeigh was already sitting in custody on misdemeanor gun charges. Federal agents traveled to Perry, where they picked up McVeigh and transported him by helicopter to Tinker Air Force Base, near Oklahoma City. Before his arraignment that evening, McVeigh met briefly with 2 court-appointed attorneys and admitted to them that he did the bombings. After obtaining a suspect's name, identifying Terry Nichols as an additional individual of interest wasn't difficult. McVeigh had mentioned the Nichols farm in Michigan as his place of residence. Nichols turned himself in to authorities in Harrington, Kansas, and willingly allowed a search of his residence. During the search, investigators uncovered firearms, stolen goods, anti-government literature, ammonium nitrate, a receipt for the ammonium nitrate purchase, Primadet explosive, a hand-drawn map of downtown Oklahoma City, and a telephone card used by McVeigh to make calls in his pursuit of bomb-making materials. Eventually, the federal government pressed charges against 3 individuals, McVeigh and Nichols for conspiring to bomb a federal building and murdering federal agents, and Michael Fortier for withholding information from authorities about the bombing and providing false statements to federal agents regarding his knowledge of the incident. Prosecutors never fully clarified their decision not to charge other suspected individuals involved in the bombing conspiracy, but it appears they deemed the evidence insufficient to meet the Constitution's stringent, beyond a reasonable doubt standard of guilt. In exchange for avoiding conspiracy charges, receiving leniency for his confessed crimes, and ensuring his wife's immunity from charges, Fortier cooperated with government prosecutors. The grand jury issued indictments against McVeigh and Nichols on August 11, 1995, just 3 days after Michael and Lori Fortier provided their testimony. Timothy McVeigh never got the trial he wanted. He attempted to persuade his attorneys to employ a necessity defense, which could have enabled him to present evidence of the federal government's perceived crimes that he claimed his bombing sought to prevent. McVeigh believed that by exposing the government's actions at Ruby Ridge and Waco, some jurors might find his bombing justified. The trial ended with the jury unanimously recommending death by lethal injection. Terry Nichols was tried by the state and government. The state of Oklahoma sought a death penalty conviction on 161 counts of first-degree murder. In the end, he was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 161 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. On May 27, 1998, Michael Fortier received a 12-year prison sentence and a $75,000 fine for neglecting to inform authorities about the attack. On January 20, 2006, Fortier was released from prison and relocated to the Witness Protection Program, where he was granted a new identity. During the investigation, arrests, and trials, the media searched for an additional suspect named John Doe No. 2, who several witnesses claimed to have seen. However, John Doe No. 2 has never been identified. An unmatched left leg found in the bombing debris raised the question of a potential unidentified 169th victim, but the leg had been embalmed before authorities were able to extract DNA to determine its owner. In a book called American Terrorist, Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City Bombing, McVeigh shows no remorse for his actions. When mentioning the 19 children killed by the bomb, he simply refers to them as collateral damage, with his only regret being that their deaths shifted focus away from his pursuit to avenge the Branch Davidian raid and Ruby Ridge. Timothy McVeigh was executed on June 11, 2001. The execution was streamed on closed-circuit television, granting the victims' relatives the opportunity to watch McVeigh's death. It was the first federal execution in 38 years. As of July 2023, the Oklahoma City bombing remained the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in U.S. history and the second deadliest overall.